Hello and welcome to the 60th edition of Half Hour, a podcast starring me, John Paulo Giudice, as your host. In today's episode, I will discuss travel maps with Nathan
Shnaider. Nathan Shnaider.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
I'm really happy to be here.
So I always start off kind of a similar way, but if you just want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, like what you do and why you find these kind of
Sure.
shows interesting and all that.
So to preface, JP and I, we actually met in the Czech Republic in Prague. He was the head of student council there. I was a student doing an abroad semester. And we met because he's a Peabody guy. I'm from Walpole, which is south of Boston. And yeah, it was a really cool experience. But being in the Czech Republic, having the opportunity to travel, meet people internationally, was kind of the first time in my life I ever had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, I was a student at Bryant University in Rhode Island. I was in Amherst, UMass Amherst. I was all kind of around Massachusetts kids. And then I was able to step into abroad and meet people from
game-changing,
all around the world.
Absolutely game-changing.
And yeah, I had the opportunity to explore, I think, 10 different countries, create lifelong memories, lifelong friends, and even interact with people like you that were students at an international university that I would have never had the opportunity to meet otherwise.
And it was, student council. I know that the position, I tried to make it the student body president as well. So I wanted to add that in just because I was the representative of the students, and I was the first democratically elected president at that school. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of tossed that in there.
Yeah. No.
But going there and being, outnumbered by people from all over Europe and Asia and Africa and South America even, and in the middle of the heart of Europe. It's not something that I expected. I expected to be in school with a lot of, Czech students. I know the history, so, a lot of Slovak students, and there were a lot of them there. But seeing and interacting with people, especially, in the student council from all over the world, gave me such a deep-seated understanding of how people around the world are doing things, and it was such a unique form of education.
I mean, I had lived in my apartment. It was with a student from UMass as well, Brian, a Greek, an Albanian, a kid from Lebanon, and then a kid actually from Swampscott, Mass.
That's so funny,
enough. But
right?
It was so interesting, the clashes of Massachusetts with the Greeks and the Albanians and the Lebanese, and then one of my best friends.
You had a very Mediterranean apartment.
I had
very much so.
One of my best friends was from Spain out there, Argentina, Germany, and it really sparked this passion for me to go explore their cultures more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough last March to go visit Spain, visit one of my friends, Carlota, my friend Adonis from Greece was able to come, and it was just super eye-opening to see how other parts of the world live, and these were these super formative trips that I went on, both as an abroad student and now it inspired a passion post-graduation. So it's been awesome. It truly has been. And I recommend it to everyone I speak to that travel is probably just the best thing that you can do for yourself because you learn so much about yourself, about what you want out of life, and about how other people live around the world.
And I always thought about how even traveling is so important. And I love the idea of pairing that with some kind of education. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a buddy who's thinking about doing a culinary program out in Europe somewhere, and that's going to be coupled with you're doing so much learning, interpersonally, and then you're also kind of learning either a skill or you're pursuing a degree, something like that. I tell people all the time, go study abroad, take a semester and go, just learn about it, see what it looks like. My experience was a little different. It was kind of, I went there and then COVID came and I had to fly home. I dropped out of school. It was kind of a dark time. It was, I remember feeling like, what am I doing? What's happening in the world? What I was able to then do was transfer all of my credits, from Bridgewater State to the University of New York in Prague. Everything worked out brilliantly. I was able to really kind of grasp that with two hands, and take 2 years out there. And it was kind of poetic because I remember I had an advisor, a brilliant professor at Bridgewater State University, absolutely brilliant, this woman. She kind of said, don't you think you should, you could take this journey in your junior year of college, If I had waited, I would not have been able to go because COVID took it out.
Now I'll kind of flip it to you. I mean, you lived, of course, multiple years in Czech Republic, multiple years in America.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing how they lived lives differently, it's really impactful for you. No, it's really nice to be able to experience
Oh my goodness.
both sides of it.
Yeah, and I took a lot of trips into the Czech countryside.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're going to get to this. I saw it on one of your maps that you took a little trip there. Was it the Bone Church?
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
Kutna Hora.
Kutna Hora, yeah.
Kutna
That
Hora.
was a great little town.
Yep, exceptional.
One thing I will say, and this always like leaks into a lot of my podcasts, I talk a lot about public transit and how brilliant it was there.
Awesome. Number 1 in the world in Prague.
So let me break it down for everybody just for a second, right? I would wake up in my building, and I would walk over to the green line, and I would ride that to the intersection of the yellow line, and then I would ride that all the way to its eastern end. I would get off, and there'd be a bus, that you would obviously you want to schedule it because it's like an equation, right? You don't want to screw this up because then you'll be stranded. But I would ride the bus out to the edge of the country to climb its tallest mountain. I've done this maybe 3 or 4 times. You climb the mountain, you're all done, you come back down. They have buses running until like the late afternoon maybe, if you pick the right day. And it'll just take you back to the end of the yellow line. Yep. You hop on the yellow line, you go back to the green, right? It brings you back to... Not a single car needed, right?
No.
And you're going to the edge of the country to a rural village to climb the tallest mountain in the country. And I'm a big hiker, right? Mm-hmm. Not like insane, but I like to go hiking. I do. And it was just fascinating.
Me as well.
Yeah, to ride a metro out of a city and take a bus to the tallest mountain in the country, and it's so opposite to what we do here in America. You couldn't ride a bus to Mount Washington.
I had felt the same when I was out there. It was the first time, my previous years at UMass Amherst are in Amherst, which is relatively rural outside of Amherst itself. But public transportation in Prague was exceptional. But it also around Europe, when I was in Switzerland, when I was in Italy, it's a theme that's relatively consistent where they really value that form of transportation.
Right.
In the U.S., there's more complications, whatever it be, but experiencing how they live and how those societies operate was so just formative in my thinking, especially at the age I was. I was 20 years old at the time.
Yeah, and it gets back to how in this country, I do think the car is the dominant form of transportation. Yeah. I would even argue that as like an opinion. It's really just a fact at that point.
Absolutely.
But I think for 99% of this country, way more, this makes sense. We are a country of explorers and pioneers and adventurers. You get in the car, you go wherever you want.
Yeah.
That's part of being an American. You can just drive wherever you want, do whatever you want. I just love the idea of our cities, really engaging with there's so many benefits to public transit. Yeah. It brings a city together. It's like an organism. I really felt like whenever I was riding many of these trams in Prague, many of them, that you were like a cell in like a blood vessel or an artery, and it takes you, and it's like the veins of the city, and it takes you all around.
Absolutely.
And I think it's just something brilliant that I think American cities are starting to tinker with and experiment with, and I hope that continues.
I'd say, interestingly enough, Boston and Prague are actually very similar for transportation modes. Boston has above-ground trams, underground metro buses. But Prague is light years more efficient than we are in Boston.
Oh my God!
As far as speed goes, scheduling goes, comfortability, and it really is. People always make the argument, well, it's expensive to have public transportation. It's really hard to dig the tunnels. It's hard to do all this stuff. Boston has infrastructure. We just don't have the efficiency and the operation to carry it out.
And we're like an older city too. We're like one of the oldest cities in this country, and I think it would be a great.
Yeah, I mean, and that too. I mean, Prague is one of the historical cities of Europe as well, and I think it's amazing that the European cities, given their age in comparison to the United States, have all figured it out for the most part, and we're still kind of lacking behind. I mean, certain American metros like Houston, there really is no public transportation, or in Dallas, it's very scattered, and it's really just shocking. But not to go too much on a tangent, but it's that opened my eyes. Really a lot, just seeing how far behind we are in public transportation.
Yeah, and I always think, like, if you live in a city, this is where it's going to have to be. We have to define what a city is, though. So, right, there's a million components to this argument. But what the point I'm just going to make is that if you live in a city, a car shouldn't be entirely necessary.
Yeah.
You should be able to. I felt in Prague, never once did I feel like I needed a car. Never once. In America, I've seen a few cities here in this country, and there is a certain point in the city where it's walkable, and then there is like a gap where this public transit could kind of find its way, where right now you need a car, and there's like a radius that you can draw where it's like outside that radius, probably going to need a car, or you're going to have to take the bus, and the buses in this country, we're behind. We are definitely behind, but I think we do so many things better than Europe, and we can go on and on and on about this. But I think public transit is something Americans can look at and say, we can learn. We have something to learn,
Taking that into a more travel perspective, like if someone's from Boston wanting to see the Green Mountains of Vermont, it's very difficult to get up there. It's very hard for them to get up to Burlington.
Got to drive,
to get to Montpellier or Stowe, versus even most rural parts of Switzerland or the Czech Republic, there's still access to these places. It might take longer. It might cost a few dollars. But there's other modes of transportation, versus here there's not much options. A friend of mine actually from Prague she's from Argentina, but she visited the U.S. She flew into Miami, then went up to Nashville, New York, and then Boston, and she really wanted to go see the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Getting from all the previous points was okay. It was all airplane, train from New York to Boston. Getting from Boston to the mountains was near impossible. It would have required, a very expensive bus or an Uber, but there was no way for her to get up there. And it was kind of a shame because, as she was kind of planning the trip with me, I was telling her, like, there's a lot of beauty in New England.
Absolutely.
It's just hard to get
absolutely.
there,
And it is an untapped reservoir of potential. All of these international students that more and more of them are coming to Boston and New York and Philadelphia, these places, right? And getting between these cities is possible. It's not the way I want it to be, but it's possible. You can fly, you can ride the bus, you can take the train, the Acela line. In my opinion, that is an underutilized form of transportation. I would say underpowered. I would these are the things that I would say, but we could really tap into the local economy here. Imagine how much restaurants and other places would benefit from a form of transportation that doesn't need a car to get up to these places, and it would just be, and I've thought about this many times,
I mean, I'm very aware that the cost is enormous, but I know like in Amherst, again, where I went to school, UMass, the PVTA, which is the Pioneer Valley Transportation Authority, they've done an exceptional job of connecting Northampton to Amherst, Amherst to Hadley, and all the surrounding areas. And
does it connect into Springfield too?
It does.
Okay.
And then they have Peter Pan buses as well that connect to the eastern part of the state.
I see.
So it's really just cool how I'm sure a lot of it's backed by UMass funding, which is not cheap, but 30,000 students in the Amherst area, being from Amherst College, UMass, Smith, Mount Holyoke, they can all be connected without a car.
I would love to see our the purple line, the T, just the train. It goes out to Worcester now. I would love to see that connect into Springfield someday.
Yep.
I remember I was listening to some of the it was a hearing in the State House, and I was listening to some of the audio, and they were talking about how there's a lot of diesel particulate matter that these trains emit that is not healthy for people living in communities that are underprivileged and underserved, and I would love to see our Massachusetts be this kind of pioneer in I think they should electrify that rail. I really do. I think that would be a great step to take. Diesel trains are a lot more reliable. I can't disagree with that. But the fact that it goes through these neighborhoods and the matter that's coming out of the train, I start to think about the cars, how many cars are in our cities, and all of these things. It would be so brilliant to just kind of, Massachusetts is a state that would benefit greatly from enhanced public, transit connections. And I love how we kind of jumped into this topic, even because this was part of what we saw traveling, and this kind of transatlantic cable. I mean, I interviewed some of the ambassadors that were in Prague. I was very lucky to be able to do that. And kind of viewing their take on even foreign policy or, all of these. It was such a brilliant experience to be able to have. I mean, I interviewed one ambassador from Antigua and Barbuda to the United States.
Yep.
That was, it was tough to kind of get some of these things going because the United States is such a vast country, and
it's huge,
and the ambassadors that are here are, they're really high up. They're representing their country, and they're, the United States is such a large country. The Czech Republic is obviously much, 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 much smaller, 10 million people. So I was able to really talk with these people because it's a smaller country, right? So the stakes are different. And just the fact that I got these experiences as just an average person from Peabody, Massachusetts, I was able to kind of gather all of these experiences, from around the world and utilize them to my own benefit, but also to others. I can tell people what I saw, and I think it's for the good of our country that we have people, going out, gathering knowledge and bringing it back.
I agree.
So we can learn,
I think that's probably one of the most important things about traveling, because it really reflects in yourself, your family, your friends. I mean, how many times have you been around someone that's like, oh, when I was here, when I was there, this is how they did it. These are really cool shoes they had. This is a cool idea they had. This is a cool food they had. It's the mixing and matching of cultures, which I think is really interesting.
Right, and I'm going to go ahead and plug your map
sure.
thing. All I wanted to say was the next question out of some people's heads is like, where was that? Where were these places? Can you point it out to me on a map?
Yeah.
And then it's brilliant because what you're doing allows people to kind of very much in short show, like, here's where I've been. Here's where I want to go. I noticed that when you showed me, there were dotted lines and there were solid lines.
I'm very happy to talk about it. So a few months back, I started a company called Mapcraft. And what we do is we create custom travel maps for people of all experiences. So a great example is I did a study abroad semester in the Czech Republic. I was fortunate to travel to 10 different countries. That journey to me was so exceptional. And I think it was important to me that I had a memory of course, the photos and the videos I took home from there, the little souvenirs, but also more bird's eye view of like the actual trip itself. So I started a mapping company where we do print maps on paper and canvas and metal, and they're like kind of like high-end souvenirs, if you will, to take home from these trips, to hang them in your office, your bedroom. And we've been offering it to all sorts of trips. Honeymoons is a really big one. That's such a experience of a trip. Honeymoons. We do a safari trip I just did, but it's really any of these journeys that are lifelong journeys. Not everything needs to be mapped, of course. My trip here to Peabody doesn't need to be mapped, but there are certain trips where it's just amazing, and you want to have that memory last for life, and you want to hang it in your room, and you want to talk about it with people. There's certain experiences where my study abroad map is hung in my living room at home. Whenever a guest comes to my home, they're like, wow, that's cool, like, tell me about this. It lets me relive the memory. It lets me share it with them.
Absolutely, all of these things,
It's for the honeymoon people. I got a review where she put it in her work office, and whenever someone comes in, she gets to remember like the love she has with her husband and talk about that. And it's like really just exceptional because photos tell a story, like I said, videos tell a story, but the map really tells a larger story of like, this is the trip that we took.
Yeah.
So
it tells a story that isn't typically told. People, show me photos, show me this.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of, here's the bird's eye view of it.
Exactly. I mean,
and when you showed me, it reminded me of the Indiana Jones, when they play the theme music and he's traveling around the world with that red line that's following him.
Absolutely.
That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, people have really taken to it because if I asked you to show me everywhere you went in the Czech Republic on your 2 years there, you can show me some photos. You can verbally tell me, but
it would look like a spider web. There's a few different
I mean, it's
places
really cool to have like that nice custom souvenir. And when I was because I was that former student that was like, this would be awesome. I went 10 different spots. I want to see kind of that spider web map, and I was looking around and it wasn't there. It wasn't something that was really being offered. So I took it upon myself. My education is a master's in GIS, which is kind of the geography software.
Very good.
That does the mapping. Good. So for me, it kind of was a no-brainer of let's start it. And the actual reason why this really picked up was I started mapping my friends' journeys. I showed them mine, and all of a sudden they're like, dude, that's awesome. Can I get one myself? So I was doing, 10 maps for them, and then they're telling their friends, and next thing you know, I'm making a lot of maps for these study abroad experiences. And then it's kind of pivoted from there, and how else can I, put these out there? That's why we get into the other trips. Cross-country road trips in the U.S. have been massive.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Really any of these trips that people spend a lot of time, energy, and effort on, we want to have that be an option.
Have you ever driven like west or south, or because
No.
I know we're up in the corner here.
No.
I always joke with people. I'm like, New York is the massive like ice wall, like from Game of Thrones, that we have to drive through to get to these other states. We have the rivalry, of course. Massachusetts, New York. The Red Sox, Yankees. I would always joke around in Europe that a lot of these countries have now, thank God, soft rivalries. They have like a softer kind of thing back and forth. And again, thank God that New York and Massachusetts, or these other states in the union, also have these kind of like sports and
Soft.
historical rivalries. Yeah, it's soft, and it's. I think it's a good thing. I think it's fun. And it was very nice to be able to drive, west and south, to these different places.
I've done none of that. If people know me in my personal life, I hate driving.
Yeah.
The farthest trip I'll do is a 4-hour ride up to Stowe. That's it.
Yeah.
Other than that, even this ride was an hour to get from where I live
I
to
have
here.
to I have to thank you for coming my way.
No
I really
worries
do.
at all. And I was, I'm sitting in the car. I'm like, I couldn't even imagine being in a 6-hour car ride, 7-hour car ride. And other parts of the country do it all the time. I mean, if you live in like Texas,
Oh my
Austin,
goodness!
Dallas,
Like you drive like forever, and Europeans, they would crack up. They'd be like, "Oh, I had to drive like so long. I had to drive so far." And then we kind of talk about it here in America, and the distance can boggle their mind of how far.
And very, very fortunately, I talk about it from the European perspective because we live in Mass, where for me it's 30 minutes to Rhode Island, 30 minutes to Boston, 30 minutes, kind of 30
we
minutes.
live in a
everywhere.
very petite,
So
smaller part of the country.
My big trip is going an hour 40 to UMass. The occasional time I'll go to visit people, and that's my big trip, an hour 40. Versus other parts of the country, they're doing an hour 40. You go to work, and it's really just shocking to me. Like I have that mindset like the European, but the rest of the country does not have that mindset.
No, of course. And again, I feel like New England is kind of in an unnatural kind of a state. If you're kind of following what I'm saying, which is the fact remains that this state is very densely populated, and it would really I think that there are a sizable number of people that own a car, but they're not like passionate about owning it. And the only reason they own it is because there's no other reliable form of getting from point A to point B. There's so many people that don't leave the greater Boston area, and if they do, it's not something that's common. And not that there's anything wrong with that, you live there, you don't leave the greater area, that's fine,
Yeah, rarely.
That's your life. And it's like, imagine what could be done, how much money people would save. I don't have to pay for the car, the payment, the insurance, the tires, the gas, on and on and on it goes. And it's if we just, I don't want to go too far.
I would say I probably leave Mass, with the exception of 1 week in Vermont and the occasional like Newport or Providence trip, maybe like 5 other times in the year. I don't ever leave Mass. I don't rarely go to New Hampshire, rarely Maine, but leaving New England for me is like never. I never leave New England unless I'm traveling abroad, or I'm going like Florida or some like airplane travel.
Yeah.
I have not driven out of New England in probably over 7 years.
Wow.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, and I always crack people up because if we need to get to the rest of the union, we're going through New York no matter what we do. We have that kind of like soft, at least the baseball rivalry was there.
Unfortunately, that's where I'm from too. So I'm kind of really teetering the line of born on Long Island, grew up a Yankees, Giants kind of guy.
Oh, okay,
And now
all right.
I'm coming to Boston as a.
Now you're in Mass.
Trying to transition into like a Red Sox, Patriots. I mean, I live next to the stadium. I have to be a fan.
That's funny, man. Let me pick your brain on something. I did a podcast with someone at UNIP. Now it's time's flying by now, but I was saying with her, does New York see Boston as the same way we see them, as like that? For us in Boston and the greater Boston area, like New York is kind of like the the rival city. I know like even New Jersey sees New York this way, and like
I can
don't
speak
know
to
about
baseball.
Philly.
Baseball,
Yeah.
yes. Other sports, I don't know for sure, but I can say definitively that Yankees people dislike Red Sox people the same amount, vice versa.
Yeah.
That carries into the larger city. So
Yeah.
like, I'm sure no New Yorkers real happy about a visit to Boston if it's anywhere near Fenway where the Red Sox are.
And even looking at Connecticut, Western Connecticut is big Yankees and New York fans, so we kind of bust them up a little bit sometimes. But even kind of getting back to the highway thing, like when you showed me those maps, it was so brilliant that you're kind of you're showing where people are going, what they've done, what the story behind it is. And even when I'm doing like these road trips, sometimes I love to turn the GPS off and put the map in such a way that you can see your little blue dot traveling along the highway.
It's cool, right?
Yeah, and you can see like where the curves are and what cities you're passing through. The way the highway system was built was to kind of emphasize, if we needed to move millions of men across the country in case of a war, but also, what is the most efficient way to get from point A to point B for civilians and cargo and a million of these other things. And it's funny how the economy was built off of, our modern economy was built off of, these highways kind of being built. The way I can kind of put it to you is, I did Instacart for a little while. Instacart was built off of things that already existed, which was the internet, which was grocery stores, and
people with cars.
And roads and people with cars, right?
Yeah.
And then someone put that together and said, well, here's what we can do with that. So it's funny how innovations occur with things that already exist.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's actually a pretty good example, Instacart. I mean, people, I guess that's how most businesses are really, right? I mean, everyone kind of just pulls stuff together. Like for what I'm doing, the journey, you do the journey, the way that you do the journey is already made, and we're just kind of like putting it together as one experience for you. Yeah,
and I love, I'm someone who loves to see geography, so I love to see that you're doing this.
I appreciate it. I mean,
putting maps up in a home. I definitely will have one of these someday. I definitely will get one of these.
It's early on. Like I said, we started it not too long ago, and it's growing steadily, but right now it's just kind of, I think the main focal point for us is letting people know this is an option.
Right.
I think that's our biggest barrier to entry right now, is that we have the capabilities to make them, produce them at scale. Our printing partner.
It's just getting it out.
It's just letting people know, like, when you do these trips, when you do these honeymoons, that's an option. So the route that I think is most optimal for right now is partnering with larger organizations. So partnering with like a UNIP, which is the school we went to, their study abroad program, partnering with travel advisors because they source clients that are already having these like really big experiences. So why don't we like kind of push a map on them as well and offer that to them? So that's kind of like how I'm approaching this right now, is working through people that already kind of have the clients of travelers. And yeah, I mean, it takes time, but I think we're well on the right track right now.
Absolutely.
So I'm very excited to see how it comes, because I like you, I would love to have everyone that has a study abroad experience be able to have a map like this, even if it's a small print, put on their desk, put on their wall.
It reinforces the geographical component, where you can start to identify these countries. I mean, there is the notorious quip, you go to Europe and they're like, oh, sometimes the Americans don't know where these countries are, and then I always throw it back at them. I say, where's Nebraska? Point it out on a map. And they go, I can't. So it's one of these things where I would love to see both sides of the Atlantic kind of embrace this, No,
I would love for that. I mean, it's just conversation, reliving memories. That's kind of the three components of it. Just I would love for people just to be able to hang these, put them on their desks, gift them to others. And I think another thing is like when friends go on trips, like a road trip, it's probably more than one person. All of a sudden, if you kind of like have 4 people all with the same photos and the same map, it's like a really cool thing that everyone shares together. So then when you kind of go to their house or the other friend's house, it's like I was a part of that trip. Like that's something that I was also like an owner in as well.
I did an internship out in Boxborough for a time. This is kind of switching gears, but not really. I was going to talk a little bit about the GIS maps.
Yeah, please.
I worked with them. I worked with them. Not. I don't think there are things that I could learn, but I'm somewhat familiar with, the service.
Were you guys using ArcGIS Pro on the Esri software? Or were you using? There's a few main ones. It's like ArcGIS Pro. There's QGIS, which is the open source one. Do you have any idea which one you're using? Or
I use the web. The web version, because I didn't have like an actual kind of I just remember I used it we not too in depth. You see, I can't even
no worries.
Discuss it too much.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're good. There was a possibility that maybe I would get more involved with the town. My employment kind of took me elsewhere, but this is definitely a service that I want to learn a little bit more about. And I think it's great that you did your master's in that.
I mean, yeah. So I guess on that, the premier software it's a company called Esri. They have ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, whatever it is, and that's kind of what a lot of municipalities will use to do all sorts of data. That's what most governments use. Also, a lot of private businesses. It's used everywhere, but because it's mostly internal, people don't necessarily see it. There's a whole world of data, geography, analytics happening in the background, but most of that stuff doesn't see the light of day. I think the best way I would explain to anyone interested is it's almost like Excel, but if the data had coordinates. So we're doing analysis basically on Excel, but all that, instead of being on a spreadsheet, it's on a map. And you can perform all sorts of various analysis, and it's really cool. I mean, it's really interesting. I have a strong passion. During my master's, I was looking at the border. So I was looking at, was it Eagles Pass down in Texas, I think is what it's called, where there was a significant amount of migrants coming in. So we're using real-time satellite data and
to see what's going on.
Some sort of deep learning.
Now, is this along the Rio Grande?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think Eagles Pass, if I'm remembering the name right, is the city that people are kind of going through. So what I was looking at was, as migrants are going through, we'd have real-time satellites be able to pick up on what a human looked like and then circle it on a map to then be able to analyze it. So that data would be super useful for Texas to then be able to say, all right, there's a significant population of people coming at 11:30 p.m. on this time. We should put up a barrier here. We should do this. And then, it also, that's one example. Another example could be, another project I did was for almost like a contamination spill. So if there was a spill here in Peabody that might affect a lot of wildlife, we'd want to do certain buffers. So I can look at we should do road closures, 500 meters out. Now, to figure out where 500 meters out on foot is very hard. There's no way for us to I guess we can kind of walk with it. We can do all sorts of stuff, but it's
old school surveying with the little
easier.
Scope and.
Yeah, it's much easier just to hit the data layer, hit 500 meter buffer, see it on a map, and then we can make decisions based on that. Maybe we want to expand it. Maybe we want to reshape it. But there's all sorts of internal geographical data analysis that happens at municipality levels, private, federal, but it's not seen that much. So it's kind of it's like a niche that people don't necessarily know a lot about, but it's very active in everything we do.
I think it's absolutely brilliant to have that kind of passion in geography and the maps. One thing, kind of taking from that, I would love to see if our citizens in this country would kind of assess, the state they live in and look to their state as kind of like their template. What can I do? What can I learn about the politics and the history and the statecraft and what's going on in my state? I think a lot of people are very focused on the nation, which is incredibly important. But each of us live in 50 states or territories or whatever, right? And it provides such a unique kind of geographical set to look at, And in Europe, people have their culture associated with their nation, and they bring that to the table, and you learn and you understand that. In America, we don't. Some states have different cultures. Obviously you have the South and the West Coast and the Northeast, right? And there's different cultures there. I would go so far as to argue that the delineations you see in Europe are much more like a hard boundary. You'll see people from Spain and people from Poland, and you'll be like, wow, there's some differences in the cultures there, vast. And I would just love to see if Americans would
Yeah.
would check out the state that they live in and gather things from
And I think to
the
your
highways and the towns and the
and what's great about that is that all that information is open source.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
from the municipality level, like we're in Peabody, you can find on their state website all their GIS layers.
Mhm.
Mass.gov is a phenomenal resource, but what's really nice about the GIS data is it's mostly coming from the government. It's pretty much all open source. So you're able to find out, all sorts of things like, how many highways you guys have, for example. It's all this information that, previously might have been hard to find, but because GIS is mostly open source data we use, it's all public. So for anyone that is interested, you can see everything from, every little property on the town to everything from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is one thing I do remember. Even using the web,
you can see everything, and it's really cool because it opens up a lot of interest, and if you really are passionate about it, you can definitely kind of go through the rabbit hole and do a lot of independent research and work that is all available, and you're not going to hit too many roadblocks on people not releasing it, classified, it's private, it's all right there on the websites.
I think it's brilliant. Our country is such an untapped reservoir of academic potential, and I really believe that. I believe that with all of the, the internet and, you could argue social media is helpful or hurtful for this, but you see this with the rise of podcasting, the two of us, right, doing. I would say it's a different kind of branch what each of us are doing, but sure, it's like people can. They have all this information at their fingertips, and you're really helping with that on the geographical side and with the podcasting side. We are getting towards the end of mine. I don't know if you want to leave people with anything, but guys, definitely check out his website. What is it? Expert Banter, right? Is that
So I'll say two things to kind of plug. So we have a podcast called Expert Banter where
expertbanter.com.
Yes. So expertbanter.com.
Check it out.
It's on Spotify, all the major platforms. So what happens there is we bring on CEOs and founders of like kind of small organizations. So it's just a really cool platform where we can learn about their business and kind of get in depth. So it's not necessarily the story of how they founded it, but it's like how their business operates, what they do, what their future looks like. And it's really a great business podcast that we're growing. Then the other side of my life would be Mapcraft, which is kind of the custom travel maps that we do. So that's still being built out, the actual shop part of it, but if you were interested, mapcraft.shop would have all the information, and it's exciting. I'm really happy that I'm able to build this right now, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it takes me.
Me too. By the way, guys, Duncan is not a sponsor. So, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Guys, check out his website, expertbanter.com. On this side of things, remember to like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do, share it with a relative, friend, family, whatever it is. So, guys, thank you very much. Peace out. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.